Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the AI 2030 show. My name is Xiaochen Zhang, the CEO of FinTech for Good, and also your host of AI 2030. Today, I have a really great guest who is also my former colleague from AWS, and welcome, Diya. And first, maybe that you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and it's good to see you again. It's been a little while. Uh, I am Diya Wynn, and as Xiaochen mentioned, I have been working with Amazon for almost 6.5 years now at AWS. And I've had the opportunity of leading and starting a practice focused on responsible AI and helping our customers engage in responsible AI. And so it's been a great journey, but we also get to do some work where we are collaborating and educating everyday consumers and individuals, as well as the work that we do with customers. So it's been exciting, and I know how important this topic is, so I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. And yeah, as you know, you have a very important responsibility that is, to make AI responsible. Um, what does responsible AI mean to you, and why do you believe it is a critical or crucial for both individual and society as a whole as we move into the AI-driven future of 2030?
Yeah, I guess the way that I would start saying this is that responsible AI is an opportunity for us to get it right, to do better, and to build AI technology driven systems in inclusive and responsible ways that can have societal benefit, that could help level the playing fields and to drive more equitable outcomes. The technology has the potential to do that, right? It's great in that we've been seeing people use AI in ways to address problems that were previously seen as unattainable. But we need organizations to be intentional. And that intentionality is what I believe responsible AI encompasses. So when I think about this and the work, I think about it very much like an organizational sort of transformational type strategy and effort that goes beyond just the technology itself, but also requires people to think about a culture of responsibility, and then having the right sort of people-centered focus that allows them to look at what elements of that does that mean in the organization, creating a new organizational operating model, if you will, right? People, processing, and technology, and all these things working together actually help them build the right foundation to be able to minimize the risk, hopefully see where there's the potential for unintended impact, but maximizes benefit, and not just benefit to the organization itself, but also benefit hopefully to its consumers, its customers, the stakeholders, and society at large.
Yeah, totally makes sense. To if any company want to translate this strategy into action, and in your opinion, what are the core pillars that should be included in an industry framework for responsible AI, considering the diverse application of AI in different industries?
Yeah, and there are tons of documents, principles, guidelines, strategies that have been instituted. I remember when I started this, my studies and focus on this about 4 years ago. I think I must have read through like probably 40 or 50 different documents, because every state and industry, now every company is sort of thinking about this. And so you'll find some very similar principles when we talk about transparency and explainability. There are a couple of things that I focus on or a few things that I focus on when I talk about this from customers. And I think the first thing is value alignment, right? With any organizational strategy, and we're talking about AI being incorporated in organizations, technology, strategy, or their strategy overall to help reshape and innovate or reinvent those organizations. So I think value alignment is important. And I look at that as like everything in terms of its alignment with the mission, vision, value of the company, but also like what does that mean from a societal perspective, right? Because in certain industries or certain jurisdictions in certain countries, what is the social norm may differ. And so we have to pay attention to that, right? What things from a regulatory perspective are in play, what is acceptable from a legal perspective. All of that to me is connecting to the value alignment. And is the way in which an organization is thinking of using that application in alignment with all of those things. And I'll only mention 3 of these. I think, like the others we were talking about, safety and transparency and security are important. But the 3 I think that are often not included in some of those principles, or may vary or less, highlighted. So the value alignment is one. The second is around inclusion. Now, we talk about fairness in the sense that we want to make sure that we're having equal or the same sort of performance and results across different subgroups or demographics. But when I think about inclusion, I'm talking about not only do we test for these things, but we focus on including their perspective and voice early in the process and in the design. That means having the right people at the table, right? And that inclusion isn't always easy, but there are things that we know that we can bring to our and use or have at our disposal in order to make that real, right? There are participatory design kind of techniques. There are things that we can do from a human-centered design perspective, right? To make sure that we're bringing in the voice and perspective of those across gender, race, age, origin, sexual orientation, culture, socioeconomic status. We probably can't bring all of that into our teams, right? But we can make sure that we're intentional about establishing or ensuring that we have that voice, so that those folks are included, right? And the inclusion is important. And I think the other thing that I wanted to highlight is around training and education. I think that is critical, and it's often one of the starting points that I reference for companies, like when they start getting started. One is we're articulating our vision and our intent in terms of using AI across the organization, and that's for everyone. Kind of like those security compliance, studies that we are, or what are they called? Training that we often have to participate in. But then making sure that we also have role-based training, because there's so many people that have a role in ensuring that we're responsible and inclusive in the way in which we build, and we're not just leaving that to the data scientists or the technical folks. And so the other individuals have to be equipped, right? And trained appropriately to know what things to ask for, to know what to think about, or how to use other techniques to be paying attention to these factors. And so I think about those as additional sort of areas of focus when companies want to get practical about, bringing responsible AI or making that a core part of their approach.
Yeah, I really like, you pick these 3 components, because a lot of the current debate are really, from the core data piece or architectural or, technical design, and, how to just train data, and all that is from more technical side, where that's, from the 3 components very clear. And then those, no matter at the strategy level or translate, even inclusion is part of a value, right? And then how that can be just included. And also training and learning training itself is part of the contribution to the inclusion, right? When you want to include them, you also want to just train them, and they are able to really just be able to join the conversation, provide meaningful input. So all the 3 components that you mentioned are also have some internal connections among themselves, right?
I think and I'm not minimizing the other sort of technical elements of this, right? Because I think that those things are important as well. But it is all of them put together that are necessary, and not just to focus on the technology. If we could put in a tool that measures or detects for bias and fairness, we might do some things, right, to make sure that we have differential privacy, for instance. But that alone is not enough to ensure that we're building safe, secure, inclusive systems in a responsible way. And again, I kind of pivot a little bit in this context. I know we don't have a ton of time, but wanted to highlight those because I think that those often aren't as much emphasized. And I think the other thing that I didn't mention as it relates to training and education is that we also need to think about this in the context of those that are being displaced, right? Because they're now introducing AI into the work, or it's having an impact on the way that they work. And of course, we're recommending an augmented workforce, right? People alongside of AI, people alongside of technology, AI being used to help enhance our capability, but people still being in the loop. But they need to be trained appropriately as well, right? In order to be able to embrace that, or to be upskilled, reskilled in a way so that they can still have a place in the workforce, right, and be competitive. So I think all of that is important in tackling some of the other areas of concern or issue when we start embracing the technology more.
Awesome. Yeah, we definitely have, for the upcoming Chicago AI conference, we'll have, one specific session talking about, those elements where that's, the impact of AI to jobs, and then, how companies can be more responsible in addressing this, when they are enjoying the benefit what AI can bring. And
Yeah.
So
It's
uh,
important. And I know for some, right, this sounds like a lot, right? A lot to do. And there's a lot of responsibility that we have, right? We've heard people mention this all the time, and I have boys, so Spider-Man and superheroes are important, right? But with great power comes great responsibility, right? And so I think that that's important, that folks realize the totality of this, not run full speed without thinking intentionally about how they bring in the technology and embrace this new power. At the same time, they take steps and maybe not eat the whole elephant at once, right? But one bite at a time, start to introduce these different things to help build the capability in their organization until it becomes part of just the way in which they work and they do business around AI.
Yep, absolutely. And we, that I think just having that vision, and then, when you just put together an AI plan or strategy where that having that, totality in your thinking in yourself is very important. Now we just, move, one level down to, talk about technically if any, organization want to launch a responsible AI initiative, or build a AI application responsibly, what tools and technologies are currently available or emerging to help organizations ensure the responsible and ethical use of AI and development of AI in their operations?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, right? So, and since I'm not representing my company specifically, I won't go into like a marketing conversation for a bunch of our services specifically, but all of the major technology players have services and tools. I'll mention a few of them from an open source perspective, right? So, TensorFlow has optimizers for or TensorFlow has TensorFlow privacy, right? They have an optimizer for like helping with differential privacy. There is Dion, which was a command line tool that you could use to be able to do like an ethical checklist, right? Or ethical checks throughout your data science projects. And it's one of those ways to sort of provide some steps for developers, right, in their process. There are model cards, right? And there are a couple of different, I've seen a number of different open source kind of toolkits, if you will, that help to create model cards. And that is, for folks to have more documentation and transparency about the development and performance of a model. There's the AI Fairness Toolkit, right? Or Fairness 360, excuse me, not Toolkit. Fairness 360, which is open source library, right? That has different things that will help as far as detecting and mitigating bias in models. Most of those other tools were like Python sort of packages or open source things. I think there is so much at our disposal in different places, and some of them have, more appropriateness depending on what their project is. I think what's important is that people think about how do we incorporate these things into our overall process. And if there's an organizational mandate, right? If we're saying that this is the way, this is the culture, this is the way in which we're going to build, that then they provide access to this tooling and technology, right, for developers to have incorporated in their process. But there are tons of things out there. They don't all address, and I think we're going to see more tools get created, especially as we think about things from a generative AI perspective, right? Those are all sort of somewhat general from a machine learning and AI use. Generative creates some larger complications, and I think people will be refining their tool set and creating new ones to be able to help with this sort of neural network large model complexity.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And again, that's just to translate that into reality. And could you elaborate on some of the core challenges that your business in general face when it comes to responsible, fair development and use of AI? Like
For
the
companies,
government side or technical side, some more
yeah.
examples.
I
Yeah.
think there's a little bit of both, right? There,
Yeah.
and this is in part why education is so important, because I don't know that every organization knows or has people fully equipped and skilled, especially since this is an area that it's still fairly new, right? We're starting to hear a lot more about this in the last, let's say, 5 years, and people have in the last couple of years been starting to institute more heavy practices. There have been some organizations that have been doing work in this area, beyond 5 years. But from a mainstream perspective, this has been something we've been talking about in the last 5. And so that means that there aren't folks that are heavily skilled or that have a ton of expertise in this area, unless they're coming out of academia where research and study has been for some time. So that's one of the complexities, right? Deloitte did a study a couple of years ago, and they called this the preparedness gap, where they talked about people and companies, executives having an understanding and awareness of the inherent risks, and that certainly is increasing in terms of their awareness. I think a recent study said 92% of executives or companies are aware, right, of the potential risk and believe that AI creates some risk for them. And what Deloitte talked about in this study was that as the adoption grows, companies have less skill and readiness and ability to be able to address those risks or mitigate those. And that in part is why I was interested and focused on creating a practice, because I realized that this preparedness gap is exactly what we often see. People are hearing a lot about the risks. They see all the excitement around ChatGPT and generative. They want to understand, how they can employ that in their products or in their organizations to get greater efficiency or to be able to innovate and bring out new, solutions. But how do we address the risks? I think that is a huge part of it, just not knowing where to start, and knowing exactly what to do, and then having the requisite skill, right, to be able to put that in place. And one of the things I think I've found as being helpful is thinking of this like the conversations we used to have when we talked about people making the transition to the cloud. And that's why I talk about this as an operating model: people, process, and technology. And if you think about it that way, I think it gives a bit of a framework and mental sort of model for people to start to think about, having this organizational plan and structure, thinking about what do we do with our people, starting to put in place process to be able to support the technology and the decisions that we need to make, and ensuring that we have accountability, and then the technology and tools to help support that.
Yeah, I think that's what you covered not only about that question, but also gave very good recommendations. If any organization want to just adopt responsible AI, and then how to really develop a plan to address the people, technology, processes, using that changing or transforming that to make AI work in a responsible way. And my last question is, looking ahead to 2030. What are the most significant trends and developments you see in the field of AI, particularly concerning responsible AI practice?
Yeah, It's hard to it's hard to speculate, right, or to predict, especially because of how rapid things are evolving. I remember looking at Gartner studies, and I actually have an opportunity, to represent our company in conversations with Gartner on a regular basis. And so I'm going through some of the content and information, and they were making predictions for this coming year, right? And none of what or most of what was written at the end of last year holds true, because we had this phenomena, right, called ChatGPT that has reshaped everything that they've predicted. So that said, I think it's difficult to know, but one thing that we can see in the way of trends is that with all of the sort of regulatory consideration that's underway, that principles around responsible AI are going to be a matter of a requirement for organizations to embrace. They're not going to have the luxury. I think when I started the conversation with many customers, there was less impetus sometimes to do the responsible AI work, to start focus on this, because no one was requiring of that. In regulated industries, they wait for regulation to force their hand in doing certain things, and we didn't have that. All right, that enforcement or that requirement. So people didn't. But with what's coming, here in the States, I think some 26 or 28 states have different sort of legislation that's being proposed in various areas. We already have things in Connecticut and in Illinois, New York, California. It's going to require people to put in place the right kind of practices so that they can address these issues and be compliant. So I do believe that we're going to see more of that as that comes. Maybe not 2030. I'm hoping that that's in the next 2 years that requirement will come, and we're going to see more companies, of course, right, that are in a position to be able to help with auditing, more tooling. I think the tooling is going to get more sophisticated because the world of large language models, sort of the complexity of neural networks, is right here. And we're going to have to do a lot in order to be able to unpack that and provide the kind of transparency and explainability that's necessary with those systems. So I know that's probably not like real predictions because it's kind of following the trends. And 2030, it would be ideal that it just is the way. We don't talk about responsible AI because it's the way that we work. It's the way that we build, that it's just that tightly coupled or integrated into our business. And we don't have a need for like this separate work stream or separate sort of focus, that it really is by that time just what we do.
That's awesome. And so what you said is also, why we just started AI 2030 as an initiative, and, AI, responsible AI becoming a core theme of the Chicago AI conference. For anyone who want to just meet Diya in person, and then, Diya is going to speak for the Chicago AI conference on October 26th. And there that we also have a lot of regulators working with other regulated industry, and then having that direct conversation. And I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, Diya. And
thank you. I'm excited about the opportunity. I appreciate you for having this platform, for the vision and creating AI 2030. We need more people, right, to be thinking and intentional about this, because there's just that much, in my opinion, at stake, especially when we think about the ways in which technology is being used and the proliferation of it across almost every industry globally. Right, we need to do this responsibility. We need to do this inclusively and responsibly. So I look forward to the conversation more that we'll have in October, and hopefully meeting some of our guests.
Awesome. Thank you, Diya. And thank you, everyone. And come back tomorrow at 8:30 Central Time. And then we are going to have another exciting conversation with my next guest. And again, thank you, Diya. And it's a great conversation.
Take care.